So George W. Bush was asked a question at some event about what's happening in Israel and Gaza. And look, this guy, to put it plainly, this is like the last person you would ever want to hear from in this situation. Like literally dead last on the list. It's like whatever he thinks, the opposite is what you should do. And the opposite is true. Okay? So he was asked about what's happening on the ground, and here's his reaction.
It's a democracy, and in a democracy, the people's voices matter, and there's going to be a weariness. You watch, the world's going to be, okay, let's negotiate. Israel's got to negotiate. They're not going to negotiate. These people have played their cards. They want to kill as many Israelis as they can, and negotiating with killers is not an option for the elected government of Israel. And so we're just going to have to remain steadfast, but it's not going to take long. That's gone on too long. Surely there's a way to settle this through negotiations. Both sides are guilty. My view is one side is guilty, and it's not Israel.
Look, he's the same guy he was. He's a colossal idiot. He's just dumb. He is just dumb. It reminded me of, you know how during the Trump administration, there was this like rehabilitation of the image of George W. Bush, even among liberals. And I was absolutely pulling my hair out and screaming and crying and shitting myself and saying, are you guys, do you not remember anything about the Bush administration? Do you not remember the subprime mortgage crisis and the Great Recession, the deregulation, the tax cuts for the rich? Do you not remember the multiple wars of aggression? Do you not remember the wanton disregard for the U.S. Constitution and international law, the torture, Abu Ghraib, Guantanamo Bay? Do you not remember any of this? It just drove me crazy, man. And look, this is beyond dumb. And even the point of like, Israel's a democracy. This is a way to try to make it seem like this is pure good versus pure evil, and that's the end of the conversation. And Israel's a democracy, so they got to be the right ones. We just discussed here. Let me see if I could find the story. Is this how a democracy acts? Likud minister formulates emergency regulations to imprison citizens who harm national morale. So if you say things that serve as the basis for enemy propaganda, he wants to lock you up. So what that means is if somebody says, hey man, maybe we should do a two-state solution. Maybe we should do a one-state solution. Maybe we should stop the apartheid and the occupation. Maybe we shouldn't let the ultra-Orthodox illegal settlers steal more Palestinian land. If you say that, a Likud minister wants to lock you up. And by the way, even to the notion, they're a democracy, and it's that simple. Is it really that simple? Is it really? They are either also an ethno-state or a theocracy or both. It is based on Jewish identity. That's the state. Now, you could defend that and say, hey, man, after the Holocaust, makes sense. They wanted their homeland. They needed to be safe, so they wanted their own homeland. But let's be clear. It is either a theocracy and or an ethno-state where Jewish people have more rights. Again, this isn't an opinion. I'm not giving you an opinion. I'm giving you a fact. So would you say that about, like, Saudi Arabia, too? The country based on Islam? Like, well, I guess they're a democracy. They're literally not a democracy. You could say Israel has more elements of democracy in it than Saudi Arabia does. But that's the lowest bar in the world, man. Jesus Christ. Yeah, they have more elements of democracy than, like, North Korea. But if you're an apartheid state and you are doing endless occupation in Gaza and you are having ultra-Orthodox, illegal Israeli settlers raise Palestinian villages with bulldozers and steal the land, is that really, it's a democracy. They're just a democracy. Really? That is purposefully glossing over all of the nuance and all of the evidence to the contrary. It's this blanket label you slap on something and say, don't look any deeper, don't think any further. Good versus evil. Look, actions are either good or evil. It's not that good and evil don't exist. They do. But actions are good and evil. So, for example, when Hamas slaughters innocent Israeli civilians, is that evil? Absolutely it's evil. When Israel does collective punishment in response and does a medieval siege where they cut off water and food and electricity and bomb indiscriminately innocent civilians, apartment buildings, mosques, etc., is that evil? Of course that's evil. He doesn't see it that way. Oh, there's no diplomatic solution. There's no negotiation. It's idiots like this who think like this who got us to this position. Maybe if at some point along the line there was anybody with courage and backbone and intelligence who stood up and said, here's what we're going to do. A U.S. president stepping in to say, what we're going to do is find a way to resolve this. We're going to create a Palestinian state. We're going to give them UN recognition. We're going to make sure we have UN peacekeepers in the region to make sure that Israel and Palestine don't do any further attacks against each other or whatever. And we're going to withhold all funding and aid and military support until we get this. If you had any U.S. president with the intelligence and the foresight to do that, we wouldn't be in this position right now. We wouldn't be. Are there people on both sides who have pure religious hatred and ethnic hatred? Sure. But is the core of the problem still the illegal occupation and the apartheid system and the permanent police state and the no human rights or political rights for Palestinians? Yes. And when people pretend like that's not the case, that drives me crazy. You have to know nothing about the history of the region to make a claim like this. Nothing about the pure good and pure evil. Really, pure good and pure evil. So is it your contention, George W. Bush, that when illegal Israeli ultra-Orthodox settlers raze Palestinian villages to the ground with bulldozers and steal their land, is that still being pure good? They're on the Israeli side. Is that pure good? Is that pure good? God, he's so dumb. Now, again, like I said, this is the last guy you want to hear from. Why? Every decision that was made in the wake of 9/11 was bad and wrong and dumb. If you said to me, hey, Kyle, you were attacked on 9/11, it was from Osama bin Laden, what should we do in response? The most reasonable, hawkish reaction is, look, do the hard intelligence work that's necessary and then send in SEAL Team 6 to murk Osama bin Laden. End of conversation. Instead, we invaded all of Afghanistan. We invaded all of Iraq. And this is this guy's legacy. And we stayed there for over 20 years. Trillions of dollars. In fact, this is how wrong George W. Bush has been about everything. Let's dive into it. This is an article I brought up a million times. It's in Business Insider. It's from 2013. It's called By the Numbers, The Staggering Cost of the Iraq War. Okay? Look at what his decisions gave us. There were 189,000 direct war deaths, which don't include the hundreds of thousands more that died due to war-related hardships. 4,488 U.S. service personnel were killed directly. 32,223 troops were injured. That's not including PTSD. There were 134,000 civilians that were killed directly because of George W. Bush. There were 655,000 people who have died in Iraq since the invasion that would not have died if the invasion had not occurred. 150 reporters were killed. 2.8 million people who remain either internally displaced or have fled the country. 1.7 trillion is the amount in war expenses spent by the U.S. Treasury Department as through fiscal year 2013. Obviously, that number is much higher right now. The amount spent per second is $5,000. It costs $350,000 to deploy one American military member. It costs $490 billion in war benefits that are owed to war veterans. It costs $7 trillion. When you take the interest payments into account and project out to 2053, because the war was paid for with borrowed money, that's how much the war in Iraq costs. Never mind the $2 trillion for Afghanistan. $20 billion was the amount paid to KBR, the contractor responsible for equipment and services. $3 billion is the amount KBR payments Pentagon auditors considered questionable. Just skimming billions of dollars off the top, no big deal. $60 billion is the amount paid for reconstruction, which was ruled largely a waste due to corruption and shoddy work. In other words, war profiteering was happening relentlessly. $4 billion is the amount owed to the U.S. by Iraq before the invasion. 1.6 million is the number of gallons of oil used by U.S. forces each day in Iraq. $12 billion is the cost per month of the war by 2008. $7 billion is the amount owed to Iraq by the U.S. after the war, mostly due to fraud. And the list goes on and on. But I think the most important number, and by the way, $546 million in spare parts missing, 190,000 guns missing, which, by the way, a lot of them went to ISIS, who went rampaging through the Middle East soon thereafter. But the most important number, 0. That's the number of nuclear weapons of mass destruction found. A bunch of chemical weapons were found. We knew they were there. We gave them to Saddam Hussein. 0 nuclear weapons found. So in other words, George W. Bush is an idiot, and George W. Bush, in many instances, is a liar. So here he is telling you his thoughts on Israel-Palestine. As I said, the last person you should ever listen to on issues of war and peace, and any other issue for that matter. Hey y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.